Ooh. That was my attempt of being scary. Did you guys scare you guys? Alright, so I'm back with another no sleep story. You guys seem to like the scary storytelling, and I love telling scary stories and just like all of that. So I found a really good one. I didn't read it, but I like went to the halfway point where there's like a break in the story, and I just like kind of read to see if it like has some kind of like spook factor to it, because I couldn't tell really by the title if it was spooky or just like a traumatic experience, but it's spooky. So I think it's more like psychological, but it's kind of long, so we might be reading a second one. I don't know, but please don't be mad if we don't read a second one in this video, because I have a lot to do today. Not that you guys aren't important. Not that you guys aren't important. It's also like 9 in the morning and I'm tired as but this is called I Was 7 When I Almost Died. There's a little smudge on the camera. Nice. I figured I didn't have to like get up and make myself look really pretty for this video because it's just storytelling. That's it. That's it. Like Dashy.
Dash! That's it!
That's it. I'm gonna get started so I know you guys want to hear the story and not me talking about absolutely nothing. So here we go. I would say it was the second worst day of my life. It was a hot summer day and I had been begging my mom to go swimming in the river at the rear of our farm. Being too young to go alone, Mom had me wait till Dad got back from the barn. He'd been training the new farm hands for the last month or so we hadn't seen much of him. He would come in for dinner, which my mom always carefully laid out at the table at 6 p.m. sharp. We'd watch some TV together for an hour or so, then I would be sent upstairs to bed either to read or fall asleep. That day was different though. Dad had wrapped up the training and we were ready for some family time. I had managed to get my mom to agree to order pizza for dinner, leaving us all with plenty of time to go down to the river. We waited outside for him. The second Dad walked to the gate. I took off into the woods, down the path to the water. I could hear my mom yelling for me to slow down. I looked over my shoulder, giggling to myself as I watched my parents chasing after me, smiles plastered over their faces. At that moment, I felt free, and I think they did too. I ran like the wind, hardly feeling the thuds of my sandaled feet on the packed dirt, and expertly navigating the rocks and roots beneath me. I didn't stop running until I felt the sting of ice-cold river on my toes. I waded up to my knees, not daring to go any further until my parents were closer, breathing in the warm summer air. I could hear them laughing as they rounded the bend about 2 minutes later, their eyes caught in a loving embrace, their hands intertwined as they smiled at each other. Then they took off, sprinting the remaining distance towards the river, my dad bellowing, "I'm gonna get you, Patrick! Get ready for the splash of a lifetime!" I screamed in delight and took off towards the middle of the river. I'd swam here dozens upon dozens of times. Dozens upon dozens of times. I knew the area like the back of my hand, down to where every rock was, where the biggest fish lived. What I didn't know was how strong the current would be at the center of the lake on that particular day. It had rained a great deal 2 nights prior, and the downpours left puddles throughout our fields. Dad had said that this rain was needed for his crops. I remember him saying how thankful he was for it. However, in this case, it was a wretched thing. I had failed to realize that this would make the river higher than it had been in a while, much higher than I was used to. As I waded deeper, I caught my foot on a rock and lost my balance. I was sucked into the racing current, my hands flung around in desperate attempt to find one of the boulders I thought would be there. However, they were all buried beneath the additional inches of rainwater that had mixed with the river. My attempts were futile. Water roared in my ears, and I struggled to keep my head up. I managed to scream and could barely make out the cries of my parents as they took off into the water after me. I was thrown without mercy by the rapids, hitting my head several times on rocks as I sped by them. I managed to steal glimpses of my parents the few times I was able to surface, gasping for air and praying they'd be closer the next time. Each reprieve was brief. I might be saying that word wrong, sorry guys. And I was swallowed by the river again, plunging into the murky water. I'm not sure how long this carried on. I was exhausted and could feel my body giving in. I think I must have hit my head on a rock because suddenly the world was black. It stayed like that for a while. When I awoke, I gasped and sputtered, coughing up the cold water that had been filling my lungs. I vomited with such force I thought I would puke up my guts. I could feel my dad's hands frantically patting my back as my mom held my hands and cried. Eventually, I caught my breath and was wrapped in my mother's arms. She kissed my head as I cried like a baby. I didn't care how embarrassing it was. I was absolutely terrified. My dad carried me there for the 10-minute walk home, none of us speaking. I think we were all traumatized, and really, what were they supposed to say? There was something oddly comforting in the silence anyways. Something about my father's heavy breaths and my mom's footsteps next to us that made me feel safe and warm, despite the horrible chill that I had from the water. They didn't say much when we got home either. I thought they were mad, but now I know they were just scared. Losing your only child, or coming close to it, would definitely be a lot to process. As a father of a young boy myself, I don't want to think further on it. The rest of that summer was spent at home. My parents forbid me from going back to the river, but I don't think I would have wanted to anyways. I don't really remember what we did instead, but I know Dad stopped spending time on the farm. He said he trusted his employees and emphasized how much more important spending time with me and Mom was. A few weeks later, just before the start of school, a 6-year-old girl, Abby Miller, from down the street, went missing. She had been playing by the river with her sister, who ran off for a minute to chase their dog that had gotten off its leash. When the sister returned, Abby was gone. Searches started as soon as the sister got home and told their mom what had happened. All night, I could see people with flashlights in the woods at the end of the field by my window. I remember my parents seemed oddly calm, saying they were sure that the girl would be okay, but thought they were lying to me to avoid any further trauma. They lost their cool composure, though, when the next morning there was a knock at the door. We had just sat down for breakfast, my mom walking to the table with 2 glasses of juice in her hand when we heard it. Bang, bang. Police, is anyone home? The glasses slipped from my mom's hands, shattering on the floor while she stood frozen. My dad threw down his newspaper, grabbing her arm and pulling her towards the stairs. Bang, bang, bang. Open up, police. My dad looked at me, wide-eyed. In a shaky voice, he said, Patrick, go open the door. Tell the officers we aren't home. Answer their questions, lie to them, do whatever you need to, but make sure they don't come inside. I stared at him as he pulled Mom upstairs, then I started towards the door. I opened it just a crack and was greeted by a large man in a blue uniform. Good morning, son, the officer said. He was quite round and rather plain-looking, save for his icy blue eyes. Are your parents home? No, sir, I said, hoping I sounded sincere. Well, aren't you a little young to be here all by yourself? He asked. No, sir, I'm 7 whole years old, I said, smiling up at him. I even know how to use the stove. This was a lie. Well, tell them when they get home that we were here, he continued, crouching down to my level. I'm sure you heard little Abby Miller is missing. We just wanted to know if anyone in the neighborhood has seen her. Have you? I shook my head. No, sir, I have not. But I know I will call 911 if I see her. That's what you do for emergencies. At this, he smiled. That's right, kiddo. Good job. But please, don't use a stove when your parents aren't home. That's not safe. I nodded, and he turned on his heels and left. I shut the door, locking it before racing upstairs to my parents' room. I flung open the door, but the room was empty. They were gone. Where are they? Where are they? My mind screamed as my panic grew. I didn't see them anywhere upstairs and raced back down to the main floor to see if maybe I'd missed them. They weren't there. I reached for the phone to call 911. This was definitely an emergency. Before I hit the final one, though, I paused. My parents hadn't wanted to talk to the police, so calling them might be a bad idea. I hung the phone back up and sat at the kitchen table for hours, willing them to walk through the door. I couldn't do anything but stare ahead, waiting as tears unconsciously streamed down my face. Around 6 p.m, there was a knock. They were home! I raced to the door yelling, Mommy! Daddy! And threw it open. Before me, there were 2 officers, the man from this morning and a younger woman. I remember thinking she had kind eyes, unlike the first officer. They told me I needed to go with them, and that my grandma was coming to pick me up at the police station. I was hesitant. My parents seemed afraid of them, so shouldn't I be? But they called the station from my home phone, and I talked to my grandma. She told me it was okay, that I could go with them. So I did. When we got there, I was hardly able to step out of the car before Grandma ran up to me, wrapping me in a tight hug so tight I could barely breathe. She cried and held me while I kept asking her, What is it, Grandma? What happened? I wish I could say the rest of the evening was a blur, but in fact, it was the worst day of my life. I sat next to my grandma while the female officer explained to me that they had found Abby Miller around 10 that morning. She was next to the river in the same embankment I had been on mere weeks ago. I braced myself, already sad for the little girl who died. Except, they told me, she wasn't dead. Abby had nearly drowned in the current, but made it to shore before she did. She happened to be ejected by the river right next to the site where my parents' bodies lay. Their dead bodies. They told me they had been dead for weeks, based on the state of decomposition. "That can't be true," I yelled, standing up from my chair. "Mom made me breakfast this morning. We're a normal family. No one's dead." My grandma grabbed my arm, holding it gently but firmly, and pulled me into her arms as I sobbed. I spent years in therapy. Eventually, I accepted what everyone had told me happened. My parents were dead, and they had been longer than I thought. I was living alone for the whole month of August. They said it was delusion as a result from my trauma, telling me that I imagined my parents being with me as some form of coping mechanism after their death. It all made sense on paper. No one had heard from them for weeks leading up to the discovery of their bodies, and it was reasonable to assume they had drowned while trying to save me. Except there's one detail that I can't let go of. I talked to Abby a few years after the incident. We were put into a lot of the same group therapy sessions and became close for a little bit before she moved away. Abby told me it was my parents that saved her. She was sure she was going to die, being bashed against the rocks in a violent current. But then she felt a hand on her arm. She looked up and saw my mother, who began pulling her towards the shore. She was then joined by my dad, who grabbed her other hand as they dragged Abby onto the sandy embankment. She said my mom held her hand and my dad patted her back as she coughed up all the water she had inhaled. They stayed with her through all the night and into the next day, right until a few minutes before she was found, just about the same time I was running around my house looking for them, right when they had disappeared. I've learned to tell people that I believe my memory was in fact a trauma response, that my parents had died and I had imagined them being with me that month. It's easier that way. But in my heart, I know that's not the full truth. They were with me that summer, whether their soul, spirit, or whatever, shielding me from the horrors of that day in early August. Eventually, they moved on to help Abby, to come to her aid when she needed them more than I did. I still visit the river from time to time. Recently, I brought my 4-year-old son to the embankment for the first time. I let him tag along while I brought flowers to the spot where my parents were found, the same site I visit every year on August 7th. As I sat on a rock staring into the river, remembering how they sacrificed their lives for mine, I heard my son start laughing. I looked over, and for a second, I swear I saw my mother sitting next to him, making a funny face, and my dad behind them watching with a smile. I blinked, and they were gone. In the car on the way home, my son said, "Daddy, thanks for taking me to see Grandma and Grandpa. They're so funny and so nice." I felt my heart racing. I wanted to tell them he didn't see them, but that would be a lie. I know they're still there, keeping watch over the river. Maybe someday I'll tell my son what happened, but for now, I'd rather not. Instead, I looked at him in the rearview mirror and said, "Oh yeah, buddy? Tell me about what you did with them." Dang. That's crazy. So, I don't know, basically like what I'm taking from it is this guy almost died in the river, but his parents saved him, but risked their lives in the process and died. And then he kind of like blacked out, and so he didn't know his parents died and just like was having hallucinations of his parents being there and taking care of him and all that stuff. But then actually at the end we see that maybe there was like some paranormal stuff going on, that they were with him, their spirits were with him and taking care of him. That was a really good story. I love that at the end the son like is like, "Thanks for taking me to see Grandma and Grandpa. They're so funny and nice." Just because like it's not like a scary ending, or I mean it's spooky, but it's not like, and then Grandma and Grandpa tried to strangle my son, or like something like super dark like that. Like it was like really like a nice ending. So I loved that. That was really good. I would absolutely love to read another story, but this video is going to be really long because the no sleep stories are not short. They're pretty big in length. pause on that.
Pause.
But I really want to be able to do another one, so maybe I'll like record another one today later, and then I'll just upload it like another day. So yeah. But guys, I really hope you enjoyed. I love reading scary stories. Like if you come and watch these videos and you're like, oh my gosh, I love hearing the scary story, and you're like, but I hate books. Go get yourself a book, bro. This is book. This is this is book. This is book, guys. This is what it feels like to read a book and just like see the story coming to life. But it's like 20 times better. Okay, you guys are done with me. That's alright. You guys have all clicked off this video. If you're still on, God bless you. I love you guys. I'll see you later. I'm gonna go get on with the rest of my day. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Go check out my most recent video because you guys love the yoga challenges. Give me that view. Give me it. Okay. Bye, guys.